Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Mars, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hope that you are having an amazing Tuesday, as Tuesdays will go. Well, today's episode, brothers and sisters, is a little bit of a carryover. We normally don't do this, but yesterday I was challenged, and rightly so, by several sisters on the Shout Out Show program, talking about the Will Smith Chris Rock slapping incident. Now, many of us saw it, and we've re-seen it and re-saw it, and of course, it was disturbing and distracting. But at the core of it was a disagreement, an emotional response to a joke by Chris Rock about a woman who was suffering alopecia, would be Jada Pinkett Smith. Now, I thought this joke was out of character, Chris Rock, just like a lot of people. And I'm going to tell you why. And we'll get into that as well. But, Chris Rock, several years ago, produced an amazing documentary called Good Hair. The premise of Good Hair was that his daughter, I guess his youngest daughter, came to him dismayed and disheartened because she said, "Daddy, why don't I have good hair?" And he made this documentary of Jeff Stilson. And they basically examined this whole idea of texture and smoothness and the aspect of what it means to black women's self-esteem, because they did focus this on black women. It was an amazing documentary. So, in a lot of regards, a lot of people kind of found that the joke that he made about G.I. Jane was kind of in bad taste with Jada Pinkett having a bald head. Now, as I was saying with my brother JT, I was not necessarily aware that she had alopecia. I thought it was stylish. She looked very good. I have a number of friends, female friends, who have bald heads, and they look tremendous. But that being said, in this case, we're talking about someone who's suffering from a disease whereby they're losing their hair, and it is detrimental. It is detrimental and it's traumatic. A lot of men don't talk about losing their hair because we just shave it off and go with the flow. But that process of losing hair is even different, and it's even more difficult for women, particularly black women here in the United States, who suffer first at the issue of white supremacy, and then, of course, black chauvinism. I don't talk about it often, but black chauvinism, the push for a black woman to look a certain way, sound a certain way, act a certain way, in particular situations. Well, we're just going through this whole Supreme Court nomination. One of the things that's coming up about Sister Ketanji's whole nomination, people talked about her hair, that she had her hair in braces. There are some discussions that her nomination process would be a little bit easier if her hair was a little bit lighter and a little bit whiter. I'm not going to go into that subject matter. I know a lot of people will. But let me say this, brothers and sisters, that the issue of black women's hair is nothing that's lost upon Preacher Moss. Black hair is very traumatic for black women. And it's because of an ecosystem that devalues the overall look of a black woman, the overall essence of a black woman. It devalues a black woman in terms of everything from the ability to give birth to the ability to have intellectual capacity to maintain families. I mean, they maintain other people's families. And here we are in this space somehow grading them on the hair. Words like kinky, nappy, getting that kitchen are words I've heard all my life. Growing up watching my grandmother and my relatives get their hair done and watching them take hot pressing iron off the stove and fry hair, trying to roll it up so it be curly, so they look good for church. You hear what I'm saying? This is the psychosis, not that I'm going through, but this is the psychosis that black women are going through. A different kind of the trauma that a man can't figure it out. Men, we are end result. If your hair looks great, cool. We don't care how it got there. We don't care what you went through. It's just that the end result is it looks like we want you to look, and that's America. So in today's show, I'm backing up. I'm going to back up. I was going to show a trailer from Chris Rock's documentary, Good Hair, but I said no because it has a comedic tinge to it. And I think in talking to several women, including my mother, this was not something to be overlooked. It's not something to be made light of. I have watched the metamorphosis of women who go through trauma regarding their hair, regarding their weight, regarding it, just all kinds of things, artificial barriers to just humanity over and over and over again. So this one is about hair. So I have designated this Black Women, Black Hair. And we're going to look at some of the episodic issues and complexities of women as they simply try to express themselves through hair, through love of their hair, through appreciation for texture of their hair. So that's what we're doing here on the Shout Out Show. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. The Shout Out Show. All right, let's go to commercial. All right, sorry about that, folks. Let's get it started.
We just need help.
Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Muslim Family Services at your command. The people who help people have to say, we need your donations, don't delay. We all have struggles from time to time, but leaders dedicated is what you find. Before another person sheds a tear, support Olive Branch, you don't have to fear. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you could feel. Sing it with me. Ooh. Ooh. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. I have a few technical difficulties. It happens on the Shout Out Show. This is live, just so you realize this is live. So behind me, I just figured I'd pick out a picture of a sister with a very, very big mane of hair. A big head full of hair. Now let me explain that these days that this look, if you will, this look is a very beautiful look. It's very chic. It's very, all those things. It's very young. Let me throw that out there. This look is very young. It's very vibrant. But when I was growing up, the idea of untamed hair somehow spoke to your character. Somehow spoke to the fact that not only was your hair quote unquote unkept, but your life was unkept. Things that we would see in the neighborhood that people would see in the Black neighborhoods, the idea of cornrows. If you wore cornrows outside of your house, sometimes it spoke to the fact that you were less than other people who had haircuts. That if you wore braids were inside of the house, or they indicated a certain social economic level that you were living at, or your parents or your family were living at. Braids were the things from across the street, down the tracks. Those people don't come on outside of the tracks. Those are those people. And these are all comments that we're talking about regarding hair. Now, what we saw at the Oscars was a little bit more than that. It was a little bit more than that. So I'm not going to put all of that on hair. But the overall discussion cannot be overlooked. Chris Rock and Will Smith have made nice. They both apologized. They both admitted that Chris Rock went over the line with this particular joke. And Will Smith was like, I had an emotional response, and it's all well and good, brothers and sisters. But again, in the end, we're watching two rich men who have nothing to do with the overall aspect of women's agency, women's licensing and permissibility to hold on and express themselves through their hairstyle. It's two men that are bringing it to light. Well, I decided, brothers and sisters, that the two men should get out of the way. And as another Black man, I should get out of the way and only introduce some of the ideas that sisters are talking about in regards to hair. My cousin Pat Sujic is a hairdresser. And oftentimes, and I love my cousin Pat, but oftentimes I would have to go past her barbershop, not her barbershop, but her hair salon. Let me say something about my cousin Pat. Cousin Pat is a wonderful hairdresser. She can do any style you want to. But if you ever go past Pat's shop, though, do not get a haircut. You will lose an ear. Back to the story. But when I was talking to Pat about hair, that women would come in, they would sit long hours to get their hair done just to come back a week or two later. I asked, what is the psychology? And she told me, she said, it's the pressure to always be on and put out this symbol of beauty that's against the European model of beauty. We always find, brothers and sisters, we always find that everything is based upon a European model or white model. If you look at the European model, white model, it's never changed unless it's changed and reflecting Black beauty or Black culture. Thus, here we are in this really, really weird and traumatic cycle trying to adapt to something that in most regards, it's not adaptable. It can only look at us. It can only look at our culture. It can only look at our music. It can only look at our dress. And yes, brothers and sisters, I am happy to say that I love the Afro. I love Angela Davis's Afro. I love Maya Angelou's Afro. I love my mother's Afro. Let me tell you something. And this is a very personal point. I have always had insecurities as a young man when I was little because I could not grow an Afro. And I sat there looking at all these beautiful sisters with their boofs out to here. And I looked at the Michael Jackson family, and all of them had Afros because it gave me something, a bit of a look into the fact that our culture was beautiful. Because see those Afros, you didn't see them with white folks. You didn't see them with the white models, and when they put on these Afros, they were wigs. We were growing real Afros. Nowadays, a lot of Afros are wig Afros, but back in the 70s, you had people putting on these wonderful Afros, and not that they weren't wigs, brothers and sisters, but they were wigs reflecting a cultural phenomenon. Now, let's get honest here. Before I bring on my folks, let's get honest here. Hair matters. Hair matters. I'm 55 years old. If I had a son that came in and part of his hair went this way and part of his hair went this way, and he had plait hair, braid hair. I'm not saying I would put him in a headlock and take him to a barbershop, but I would suggest it only because that's where I come from. But if he could sit here and tell me, Pops, this is a part of my culture and our look, I would listen. I would sit down and appreciate it. What we have not done with Black women, particularly as Black men, is sat down and appreciated what this pathway of trauma has done for Black mothers, Black daughters, Black children, and Black essence overall. We have magazines like Essence Magazine that put out Black beauty, but we're always trying to find out what white folks are thinking about our beauty. So I'm going to take a deep dive here, but let me invite our people in. They've been waiting. Sister Tana, we got Sister Rhea. How you doing, Sister Rhea? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace and blessings to you. I just want you to know Mama San showed off in Philadelphia. Good to hear from you. Peace and blessings to you and Derek and Juan. We'll talk soon. Next up, my man Bilal Salahuddin. Bilal, brothers and sisters, puts in LED lighting if you need any work done at your house. He will come and put in complete LED lighting. I saw the picture, Bilal. I couldn't resist. Peace and blessings to you and Sister Sonia. Much love. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Eric, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My brother, thank you for coming up on the podcast today, on the broadcast. Peace and blessings to you and your family, my friend. Next up, got my main man Altaf Rashid, Mr. 6 o'clock straight up, straight down. The official Canadian ambassador to the show, my main man. Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As always, we appreciate your support. Next up, we got Sister Janice Tuff all the way from Seattle. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Nice to see you, Sister Janice. You tuned in on a great show today. I appreciate always the great information that you send me and just your overall support. Sister Janice is a gem working out there in the Pacific Northwest doing good things. Shout out to Sister Janice. Next up, oh, we got my mom. See, my mom made me read the comments, and I got to come all the way over here. It says black hair can cause some women to be discriminated to the point where lately some states have passed laws against black hair. Discrimination can be painful, hurtful, not funny. And I was going to get into that. Ketanji Brown's hairstyle became an issue with some folks that somehow it disqualified her from possibly being a good Supreme Court justice, which is ridiculous. But as my mother has pointed out, there have been cases of people who've had to put out civil suits about being able to wear their hair in locks. And let me say, I said locks. I didn't say dreads. I didn't say dreadlocks. The word is locks. Dread and dreadlocks connotate something different. The original word is locks. So let me be 100% correct on that. Thank you so much, Mama Son. And we have, of course, our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so I want to make sure that I get this straight. Alopecia is a disease that causes women, disproportionately black women, to lose their hair. Okay? But the trauma of black women and their history with hair has caused some of them to lose jobs, self-esteem, and in case some of them lost their minds because it's not fair. You know, I was watching and I watched Chris Rock, and his trailer for Good Hair is awesome, but I decided to do some homework. And there's a woman, her name is Miss Brenda Randall. She's a Dr. Brenda Randall. She's a PhD in education at Arkansas State University. And she begins to talk about how hair, from a very young age, talking about her and her sisters have at a young age having to go get their hair straightened. Hear me now. Go getting their hair straightened. She talked about it so much as being, it's a value statement that you can get your hair, and if Red Fox used to say, light, bright, and damn near white, or fried dot, laid to the side, if you can get those things, that it gave you permissibility in the white world, just a little bit more, that people thought that you were thinking their way. That if you had your hair laid to the side, that, and this is particularly men, they need to do more of a study about men and their hair. But you know, the predominant issue is why? Why? We talk about so many other aspects of perception, so many aspects of narrative. Why is it that the narrative of hair, particularly with black women, continues to be an ongoing issue? And even more so, the conversation about black women and hair is sadly still being held by men. Men evaluating black hair, black women's hair, black women's appearance. And it's interesting because, you know, and Allah help me, you know, but a lot of men are guilty. We subscribe to that model of European beauty. We don't look at the historical impetus and relevance of black beauty, black female beauty, black feminism, black, I want to say, black woman personhood. We don't really spend time in that. We want this, and if we can't get this, we'll go over here. The spoils of being a black man, talking about black women's hair. If a black woman doesn't have it over here, we can find it over here. And I think that speaks more to some of the deficits we have as men, as opposed to actual black women. And I'm going to tell you, so I'm going to throw something in here, and I'm going to bring up, I'm going to bring up the video here in a minute. But I'm going to throw something out here that I want you to think about. In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, while I'm looking at all of this stuff about black women's hair, something happens in the 60s and the 70s, even on into the 80s, that changes my perspective. And I'm going to tell you what it was. I saw a Nation of Islam woman with her hair covered in white. And I couldn't figure out why her hair was covered. All I could say was it was beautiful, but I couldn't figure out why it was beautiful. And I figured out later, of course, because it was a statement of modesty that I am forcing you to value me a different way. And I'm talking about it being a young man back in the 70s or in the 80s. I couldn't understand it because the culture said, particularly as men, you get to value women, particularly black women, the way you want to. So I'm going to put this clip up. I want you to guys just check it out. We're going to run a couple minutes of it and then we're going to come back. I know we're already over Satana, so I apologize, but I'm going to go ahead and put this up here.
When we meet a person, it only takes a second for us to form a mental image of who that person is. It's what you did when I walked onto the stage. It's what I did when I looked around the room to get a sense of who you are. Identifying and categorizing people is part of human nature. From categorizing people into black and white, men and women, to adults and children. But when it comes to aspects such as intelligence, attractiveness, or confidence, we rely on much more subtle cues, such as hair. The power of first impressions is such that if I show you the image of a person for only a second, you will not only be able to tell me that this is a young woman of color, but you will have also formed an impression of how open-minded a person she is. The psychologically really intriguing thing is that your impression would have been very different had you seen this image instead. One woman, two hairstyles, two very different impressions of who that woman is. These are the findings of a study conducted by Marianne LaFrance at Yale. And in their study, they showed people images of 3 men and 3 women. Each of them were depicted with 5 different hairstyles. People were then asked to rate each person on 10 different scales, including confidence, intelligence, attractiveness, and self-centeredness. And while we might expect results to look something like this, the truth is that our impression of the woman's intelligence is very much dependent upon her hairstyle. And the effect is even more pronounced if we look at ratings for attractiveness. So hair matters, and it matters to all of us because it is a form of nonverbal communication. But it also matters because when you meet a person in the street, at work, at an event, you make a judgment about whether to talk to that person, whether to hire that person, whether to promote that person, or whether to go on a date with that person. For me, as a social psychologist who studies identity and intergroup behavior, I was not only interested in understanding how hair matters to all of us, but how it matters differently for women of color. And so for the past 4 years, I have studied hair salons and hair events, and I have traveled between England and Germany to listen to women of color's hair stories. Today, I will tell you some of these stories to illustrate how hair matters differently for women of color. Now, we have a term for a day when everything seems to be going wrong, and your hair just doesn't want to look the way you want it to look like. That is when you're having a bad hair day. But the idea is that you're having a bad hair day now, and it is going to pass. For women of color, it is not about a bad hair day, but it is about prevailing standards of beauty, race, and gender that have us think of long, straight, and wavy hair as good and beautiful hair, and kinky or curly hair as bad and ugly. As one woman told me, I've gone as far as calling in sick to do my hair. Like I said, I'm taking the day off and gone to the hairdresser to make sure I've been able to have a weave. So hair matters differently for women of color because when you made it this far in your job, you might take a look around the room and realize that there aren't many people that look like you. As women of color, you are part of at least 2 groups that are generally underrepresented in the workforce and marginalized in society: women and people of color. Of the Fortune 500 companies, 32 were led by women last year. Of the 32 women, only 2 were of color, and none was Black. Now, we may not all aspire to be CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, but as the Good Hair study published by the Perception Lab has shown, people, and this is true across races and genders, are biased towards natural Afro-textured hair. They find it less attractive less beautiful, and less professional. And so women of color may have a very good reason to emulate a straight hair look by using a chemical relaxer to break the texture of their hair, by covering their hair with a wig, or by wearing a weave, which means to have artificial or human hair extensions sewn or glued into your hair. And yet you might argue, is straightening your hair or wearing a weave really this different from people of all shades and color dyeing their hair to cover gray strands? After all, we not only live in societies that value whiteness, but that also value use. Now, I would argue there's another reason why hair matters differently for women of color, because we're not just biased towards the natural texture of Afro hair, but we have also formed usually negative stereotypes around hairstyles that are particularly suitable and less damaging to natural Afro texture.
Somehow, not only is your look, if it's not a European look, somehow unprofessional, unattractive, but somehow it is deserving of demerit. It is deserving of putting you in another category, whereby people are judging you on your hair. And here's a crucial point that she's getting to. They're judging your ability to make decisions based upon your hairstyle. Looking directly at your hairstyle, they're establishing character judgments on what kind of CEO you could be, what kind of employee you could be, what kind of homeowner you could be, what kind of business owner you could be. And these are the things, brothers and sisters, that we cannot overlook. These are the things that frame us and frame our community time and time again. So look, let me throw out a couple issues, a couple ideas here. And Sister Tatana, she's trying to come back. You may have some technical difficulties, but let me frame these few things, okay? If we're not addressing them now in 2022, as we have gone through the pathway of the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the Sandra Bland's and all of these people in terms of social justice, in terms of recognizing our ability to have agency, but yet and still, we have these issues laying underneath the gird of Black empowerment, Black evolution, all those things. Then what is it exactly we've been doing? Because the hair issues have been around a lot longer than the George Floyds and the Breonna Taylor. It's been around a lot longer than police brutality. We're talking about something that is generational. For all you fathers out there, particularly Black fathers who have Black daughters, we have to explain this and at the same time admit our complicitness because we've allowed it to go. That sometimes we tell our children to wear your hair a certain way because we've been conditioned to wear our hair a certain way. We've been conditioned to think that if we don't have a particular look, that we're going to be locked out of options and opportunities because that's the way society has framed us. No more either than the fact that if Martin Luther King had dreads or Malcolm X had dreadlocks or Bob Marley had a fade, brothers and sisters, would it change the nature of their greatness? The question I offer to you and the answer I offer to you, which is absolutely not. If that's the case, then why are we still in 2022 having these arguments about the blessed creature of Black womanhood and their crowns? I don't know. Something to think about here on the Shout Out Show. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the wrap up because we need to get ourselves in shape, brothers and sisters. As you know, Ramadan is right around the corner. We are going to be starting on Saturday, the Preacher Moss Ramadan 30 for 30. So, you know, we're going to be going 7 days a week. Please don't forget, we're going to put our stuff out on social media, but we also make sure that we're admitting it here. You don't want to miss this Ramadan because we have guests, we have reflections, we have a lot of stuff, some special things that I'm hoping to do as well. So let me go ahead and get to our sponsors because they've been great. We want to give a shout out to www.befinancialindependent.com. Again, that's www.befinancialindependent.com. If you don't want to go to the website, call 202-508-3780. Again, that's 202-508-3780. Next up, Of course, we got ushub.tv. Again, that's ushub.tv, who's coming to the fray. They are doing some great things. Check out some of their program. They got a cooking show during the month of Ramadan. I don't know why they got a cooking show during the month of Ramadan, but they do. I'm going to make sure I check it out. After sundown, check out the cooking show after sundown. You don't want to get hungry throughout the day. That's usup.tv. And of course, we'll give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Go to bayanonline.org. Again, that's bayanonline.org. And we cannot forget our brother. We can't forget our brother, Ijaz Saeed, my main man over at Convenient Urgent Care. Convenient Urgent Care. That's right, home of the smart patient. So make sure you go to www.convenienturgent.com. Again, that's www.convenienturgent.com. I'm Preacher Moss. That's our show. On behalf of myself and Satana Whitfield, we'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Take care of yourself. And for all you beautiful black sisters with that hair out there, on behalf of myself and a lot of brothers, I'm sorry. You are beautiful. That's the show. Hey, babies. Welcome to Radio WCUC, Convenient Urgent Care, home of the smart patient. This is DJ What It Do. You know what time it is. It's the top of the hour, and the request lines are open. You know what you want to hear. I know what you want to hear. Operators are waiting.
I just got to hear Don't Get the COVID.
Don't get the COVID, put your mask back on. The Delta COVID, more contagious than before. Don't get the COVID, go on and get the vaccine. You know that it can keep you safe, and your people living up in your space. Don't get the COVID, you need to wash your hands. The Delta COVID is more deadly than before. Don't get the COVID, go on and get your vaccine. You know that it can keep you from dying. Don't leave your family all alone and crying. Don't get the COVID.
We invite you to join our fight against COVID and against misinformation. It's time to listen to the doctors and trust the science.
When I think of people dying that don't have to die, it makes me sad. Now is the time to be sober. Together we can make this thing over. Let's fight the COVID. Convenient urgent care, home of the smart patient.